thanks for having me here today, and Barb, thanks for the introduction. So as you said, my name is Josh Newman. I'm currently a PhD student here at UW Nutritional Sciences. And I just wanted to make this just known that I wanted this to be a very informal discussion. So please feel free to stop me at any time, ask questions, if you know things are not making sense, ask me to clarify, things like that. I really want you to be able to interject when you would like to. So just a brief introduction about me. I'm actually from the northern suburbs of Chicago. I grew up in Northbrook, Illinois. I have a fairly big family. I have 3 brothers, who's actually one of us a twin, looked nothing like him. And I also have a sister. And as Barb mentioned, I did my bachelor's in kinesiology at the University of Illinois and actually got a minor in gerontology, which is the study of aging. Then I went on to do my master's in nutritional sciences at Iowa State, where Barb mentioned I focused on one of the B vitamins that are in our diet, folate. I'm sure you guys have heard of folic acid, folate maybe being added to cereals and things like that. So that's one of the vitamins I studying as my master's. And now actually I transitioned to UW, and I'm still continuing doing my PhD in nutritional sciences, where now my research is focusing primarily on type 2 diabetes, with an emphasis on looking at how maybe dietary fat may influence insulin secretion and blood glucose levels. With my future plans, I'm actually planning on going into potentially cancer biology with an emphasis in pediatric oncology. So that's my emphasis right now. We'll see what happens when I get through my program in the next couple of years. It may actually change. So,
how are they related? I mean, you're into your cancer future plans compared to diabetic. I mean, what is the
so there's actually
coalition?
There really is kind of an interesting. Obviously, they seem like they're very two separate entities.
Yeah.
But a lot of things that's happening in, for instance, diabetes, similar things are also occurring in cancer, maybe just in a different way. My understanding in nutrition and metabolism, has got very close connection between the two diseases.
Okay.
But again, it might actually change in the next couple of years. So before I keep going, I would like if you guys could just introduce yourselves to the group, so I get to get a sense of who you are and where you're from. So maybe if you're originally from the Wisconsin area, your name, and maybe just one of your favorite hobbies. You can say that. So you want to start?
I'm Edith Gelser from Verona. I'd like to get into genealogy, but I haven't conquered that yet.
Okay.
I'm Dodie Sager. I used to work here.
Okay.
It's really dark now. I'm lazy.
So what do you like to do for fun then? What's one of your hobbies?
Playing cards. Playing cards?
Playing cards is a hobby.
I was gonna say
Go ahead.
the games. That's fine.
Okay. Okay.
Bob Sears, our husband.
Okay.
And we're from Verona.
Okay.
And we play cards or just don't do much of anything, but yet we're all busy.
Okay. You, sir?
Bill Hardy from Verona, originally from Iowa, way back. Type 1 diabetic developed in high school, so I've had it for a couple of years. And I used to be quite active in sports. Now I'm a little more on the sofa side of sports, watching.
Okay.
But I'm really, I don't know, diabetes, it can sneak up on you.
Yeah.
And I'm just more interested in it.
Yeah, so there's definitely a difference in type 1 and type 2 diabetes, and I'm not going to really get into the basics behind that, but the overall goal of monitoring what you eat will definitely be attributable to both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Is really trying to control what's coming into your body and actually how your body is then handling the sugars and food that you're putting into your body. So.
Maggie Holman from Verona, and I like crafting,
Okay.
and I in the exercise group here.
Okay.
I've seen for 2 years now on Monday and Thursdays, and I love it.
Okay, and that's fantastic. Exercise, and I'll explain that too. Exercise is a perfect way to manage and monitor, or not to monitor, but to manage type 2 diabetes and blood sugar.
I wrote a desk, and I live in Verona here.
Okay.
I like to take pictures is my hobby, and I like, just need to know more about type 2 diabetes.
Okay.
And the diet.
Okay, great. So again, please feel free to stop me if you have any questions, if you have any comments or anything like that, you just want something maybe clarified a little bit further. And if I'm speaking too fast or not enunciating clearly enough, please raise your hand and let me know. So then again, I'm going to go through how to actually read through the nutrition facts panel, how to understand that, and certain things to look at, and some things that actually might be hidden in the nutrition panel that you may not have been aware of just by simply looking at it. I'm also going to briefly go into how food and drink choices will affect your blood sugar and how you can maybe modify your diet slightly just to have a better control of the release of sugar into your bloodstream, and also how you can monitor or how you can change certain food types to influence your absorption of blood sugars. And then at the end, I'll have any questions and answer, a question and answer session if you guys have any further questions that we haven't covered through the talk. So the first question is, what is a nutrition facts panel? I'm sure you guys have seen a nutrition facts panel. How many of you actually have been able to understand a nutrition facts panel, and then this is going to be a complete waste of your time? Okay, so yes, nutrition facts panels, they can be fairly informational, but they can also be very deceiving. Unfortunately, with the way our manufacturers portray things on nutrition labels is sometimes deceptive, but also it's there to also inform you. And again, I'll go through as to why it may be somewhat deceptive in looking at the nutrition facts panel. So I'm sure you've seen a nutrition facts panel. I also have some examples of the nutrition facts panels here as well that I will actually talk about a little bit later. So this entire nutrition facts panel is actually based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So they came up with this 2,000 calorie diet based on an average of a whole bunch of Americans or a whole bunch of people. So this 2,000 calorie diet may not necessarily be attributable to me. I, for instance, may need a higher calorie content if I'm more physically active, or you may need a less caloric content if you're less physically active. So for someone who is maybe an ultra marathoner, they may need 5,000 to 6,000 calories, whereas someone who's more sedentary or maybe more of, someone who sits on the couch and watches TV during the day, those people may need 1,500 calories or less. So that's what this is actually telling you, is based on a 2,000 calorie diet. In addition to being based on a 2,000 calorie diet, it includes the total weight in grams of each one of the food components in next to the what the food component is, and they also have the percentage. Again, this percentage is based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So again, you can do the math, and it'll actually, when I explain the footnote at the end, it actually does the math for you, so you don't even have to think about it. And also, you'll see on most labels, there'll also be 4 vitamins and minerals listed at the bottom. And the only reason why those are listed is because we have deficiencies, or known deficiencies without these in the diet in previous years. So it's been added to all labels based on that. So it's vitamin A, C, calcium, and iron. And again, these percentages are based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So the first thing that I usually look at, and I recommend you guys do as well, is when you're looking at a nutrition facts panel, look at the serving size. So if you, as you can see in this example here, the serving size is 1 cup. However, you can also notice that there's 2 servings per container. So just because you eat the entire, so if you eat the entire container, you're not just eating 1 cup, you're actually eating 2 cups. So this can be also deceptive. So say you sit down and have a bag of crackers or something like that, and it has something like this label, and you eat the entire bag. Well, you're not necessarily just eating 1 cup, you're eating 2 cups, so it's 2 servings. So this is, again, you have to make sure that you can understand where the serving size is coming from. So that's one of the first things that I look at. So again, like I said, the entire package is actually double everything on this list. Any questions so far? Does this make sense? So the next thing you look at is then the calories. So as you can see, the total number of calories here is 250. But again, as I said, if you eat the entire package, you're not eating 250 calories, you're actually eating 500 calories. So again, making sure that you know how many servings are in per container, and then also looking at the calories. And I'm sure you've all seen a bag of chips, you know, a big bag of chips, and you see, oh, it's got the nutrition facts panel on the back, and it says, you know, whatever it is in terms of the caloric content, but there's 20 servings in the bag. So if you sit down at your couch and you're eating your chips and eating chips, half the bag is gone, and you don't realize you just put in 2,000 calories into your stomach. So that's one of the things you want to take a look at, is seeing what the serving size is, and then looking at how many calories that is. And then what it'll actually say on the side, and I don't know if this is actually required on all labels, but you'll see that there's included calories from fat. And that's just showing you that if majority of the calories are from fat, then it's a very high fat food. So that's what you can get from that as well. And then in terms of what's contributing to the total number of calories, really that is only the carbohydrate, fat, and protein that you'll see listed here on the nutrition facts panel. So that's what's contributing to the amount of calories that are in food. So the next thing you can look at is then the total amount of fat. So I'm sure you've seen, you know, on the news people saying like, oh, fat is bad, fat is bad, fat is bad. But fat isn't actually a necessary nutrient. There are certain fats that we can't get other than from the diet. So it's definitely a required nutrient. Most of the time you'll see listed these three types of fats. So saturated is the first one, and those are typically associated with more animal products, nuts and things like that. And I'm sure you've heard too that saturated fat has been the bad fat per se. But there's a lot of research out there right now suggesting that it might not necessarily be the saturated fat that's bad. So in terms of recommendations, you probably do still want to minimize the amount of saturated fat you are consuming within that regard. There's also something that's not listed up here, but there's something called an unsaturated fat. So if you take a look at, for instance, olive oil or canola oil or something like that, you'll see that these fats are actually listed on that nutrition facts panel. And there's also something called trans fats, and I'm sure you've seen this in the news as well. People trying to say that zero trans fats are added to the product as potentially being unheart healthy. And what trans fats are, it's basically taking an unsaturated fat and making it more shelf stable and putting it into products that are going to be sitting on the shelf for longer periods of time. So it's a way to increase the shelf life of certain products. And they actually, since they're called trans fats, they're unsaturated fats that actually look like saturated fats. So that's why people are saying that it's more of a bad fat and that it's quote unquote not natural. An interesting thing about trans fats is even though a product says it has zero trans fats in it, doesn't necessarily mean there's zero trans fats in that. And I'll go into that, how you can kind of look through the ingredients list to decipher if it does actually have trans fats in it. So are there any questions so far?
So many things are labeled nowadays, no
Yep.
trans fat. I
Yep.
mean, there's a lot of.
Yep. And I will show you a trick. You can actually look in the ingredients label to actually
Okay.
say, oh, that's got trans fat in it, I don't want to eat that, or I don't want to limit my products. And if there is something that is a processed food or it's a shelf-stable food that has fat in it, more than likely it's going to have a trans fat in it. And again, I will show you how you can actually decipher that through looking at the ingredients list. So the next thing on the list is the cholesterol. So cholesterol actually only comes from animal products. So when you see advertisements for a no cholesterol food or a low cholesterol food, if it doesn't have an animal product in it, it's not going to have cholesterol. So that's the one thing. So cholesterol, we actually make cholesterol as human beings. We can actually make enough to support all the cholesterol we need in our body, but when we actually intake cholesterol, we can actually increase the concentrations of cholesterol in our body. So that's one of the reasons why we want to also limit the amount of cholesterol we're consuming. I don't know if anyone takes statins here, but that's actually one of the things that it's aimed to prevent, is to prevent the overproduction of cholesterol in our bodies. But also limiting the amount of cholesterol you're eating is also beneficial as well. And again, the percentage is based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So sodium is also a big food component as well. I'm sure you've heard people linking sodium to high blood pressure, and that is definitely true. And the concentration of sodium that's recommended in our diet is around 2,000 milligrams. So you can see here, if you consume this entire package, you've got almost half your sodium recommendations for the day. Interestingly, sodium is not really linked to a 2,000 calorie diet. So just because I'm eating 3,000, 4,000 calories doesn't mean I can have then 4,000 milligrams of sodium. The recommendation for having sodium in a diet is still around 2,000 milligrams. And again, that's based on hard evidence and hard science. And I actually think that the concentration or the amount of sodium has actually increased since I'd actually realized that it's actually not 2,000 milligrams, it's actually 2,300 milligrams. So they're actually increasing it slightly. And the major reason why sodium is added to a product is it acts as a preservative and also flavor. So this is, again, added to processed foods so that they can become longer shelf stable. Okay, so carbohydrate. So as a diabetic, looking at carbohydrate intake is a very important component of controlling blood sugar levels. So included in carbohydrate is sugar. So all sugar is considered carbohydrate in addition to fiber. Fiber is also considered a carbohydrate, but what's interesting about fiber is we actually can't digest it. So that's why it's called fiber. So we actually ingest the food and it actually just passes straight through us. So it actually doesn't even count towards any caloric density in our foods. And again, like I said, it's one of the most important components for diabetics to take a look at in terms of food components. Protein's also listed. There's actually no requirement for protein because the requirements for people across the entire age span is very, very diverse. So based on your protein needs, it might change throughout your lifespan. So that's one of the reasons why it's not actually considered in terms of a daily percentage value. And as an elderly and growing population, it's very important that you get enough protein in your diet. So making sure that you have adequate protein levels at every meal. So again, vitamin A, C,
Question
calcium.
here.
Oh, sorry. Question.
How much protein should a senior citizen get?
Okay. So the calculation for figuring out approximately how much protein you need is, if you know your weight in kilograms, it's 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So you want to make sure you're getting enough of that. So say, for instance, if somebody weighs 50 kilograms,
Which is how many pounds?
Right, convert that.
I don't know the conversion off the top of my head. But that's the conversion rate, and I can figure that out, and I can give you guys that information at some other point. But that's like the actual amount you would need. So say somebody weighs 50 kilograms, they would need 40 grams of protein in their daily diet. So again, if they ate this entire package, they'd be getting 10 grams, which is about 25% of what their daily requirement is. Just because you eat more, it's not going to be detrimental unless you have renal issues. So having a high protein diet when you have kidney problems is one of the issues with having a high protein diet. So that's one of the things you need to look at in terms of protein concentration. But you definitely want to consult your doctor before you consider doing any drastic changes in protein intake as well.
Isn't it about 2.2?
Yeah, it's around 2.2.
And then, so if you're looking at 100 and some pounds.
110.
110
Thank you,
pounds.
yes.
So yeah, so if you're 110 pounds, about 40 grams of protein is what you would really need for the daily requirement. But again, you want to consult your doctor before you really do any drastic changes in changing, their overall protein consumption. Because again, eating too much is not necessarily a bad thing. So again, the vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, and iron are all required on the label just because they were shown to have deficiencies earlier in when this label first was developed, and so they've just kept it on ever since. And at the end, I'm going to talk about supplements and show one of the supplement labels that I pulled off the internet and showing how drastic the percentages can change, and also some of the things they put in there that may not necessarily be beneficial for someone to take. So there's also a footnote, and this is what I was talking about earlier. So this does pretty much all the math for you. So if you're looking to control the amount of fat you're taking, saturated fat, et cetera, based on a 2,000 or 2,500 calorie diet, this will tell you how much you need to eat, or at least how much you should limit in your diet based on that. So that footnote is also included on each of the nutritional facts panels. So the ingredient list. So I chose Cinnamon Toast Crunch because it has some kind of interesting things that I can actually point out in it. And as I was saying before about the trans fat, I'm going to point out to you how you can actually get around their kind of blind leading of not having any trans fat into the foods. So the way an ingredients list actually works is what it does is it actually separates or lists the ingredients based on how much is actually, the largest quantity of that substance is listed at the top, with the smallest amount listed at the bottom. So with this ingredients label here, whole grain wheat is the highest density in the food item, whereas something like cinnamon is a lower quantity in terms of weight in this food. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking at it in terms of weight, we'll just say gram quantities. So cinnamon may have, half a gram's volume in an actual cup of Cinnamon Toast Crunch, whereas the whole grain wheat might be 10 grams. So which is a considerable amount more. So that's how you can actually see how much is in each one of these food items. And you can see where sugar is added. So that means sugar is a very high component of this food item. It's listed second. So there's a ton of sugar added to the cereal, and obviously if it's geared towards a younger generation, they want it to taste good. So sugar is added to foods to make it taste good. So since it's up higher on the ingredients list, it's got a very high concentration in this food item. So like I said, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, I believe on their label has listed 0 grams of trans fat. So the thing with trans fat is they can list 0 grams of trans fat if it's under 0.5 grams of trans fat. So if it's under 0.5, say it's 0.4, they can list it as 0. But you can actually look at the ingredients list and you can pull out where the trans fat actually is. So if you see anything that says partially hydrogenated, it's got trans fat in it. So if you're concerned about trans fat concentrations, look for that word partially hydrogenated, and it's got trans fat in it. So actually I have an example of that on this sprinkles container that I pulled out of my car. So you can actually see here, sugar is listed.
You can use that magnifying
Okay, yeah.
glass too for that.
So sugar is listed first, and then it's got partially hydrogenated oil on the next. So that's an example of what would have a trans fat in it.
Excuse me, Josh?
Yep.
Because it's position on that, does that mean that there's a lot of that in there then?
So
If it's listed as the 5th or 4th?
yeah, so so there's a lot of it in there. So
Okay.
so the only thing is, so you can tell in terms of the quantity how much is in the ingredients list. but the problem is you don't know exactly what percentages of each is in there. And also, since it says whole grain wheat, it's actually got fiber in it. So if it has the word whole in front of it and grain, et cetera, it's got fiber in it. So that's one of the things also that's beneficial, and I'll talk about in a little bit, for individuals with diabetes. If it just says wheat flour, the fiber's been taken out and it's been processed. And I'm sure you've seen products that say enriched white flour, enriched wheat flour. The enriched part is actually where the vitamins and minerals come in. So in all of our cereals, we add vitamins and minerals because when we process it, we take it all out. So we have to put it back in. And just because we put it back in doesn't necessarily mean it's in the same form as it is in the foods. So like I was saying, the B vitamins are actually added back. Folic acid, what I did my master's research in, is also listed here. So these are added back to enrich the food items that they've actually taken these vitamins and minerals out of. So, and again, the ingredients list is required, but this is not required to be listed. Are there any more questions? Are you guys taken aback because the food industry has been hiding things? And that's the way they do it. And since labeling is done this way, they try to hide things like that. So again, if you look at the ingredients list, you can kind of take those things out. And if you still want to eat it, you can still eat it. Again, it's not.
What about the dextrose? What is that?
Dextrose is just another sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So more sugar, salt, so, things like that.
All those different names.
Yep, so dextrose, fructose, things like that. And I also have an example of fructose as well, and I'll talk about high fructose corn syrup in a little bit. So I guess I kind of posed a question now. So is this a good food item? So I'm going to see if I can get some interaction from you guys. What levels are good, what levels are bad, and how can we make it better? So to give you an idea of what this product is, I just did a search online. This is actually a product available at Costco. It's a chicken dish with like a mushroom sauce and things like that. So if you take a look first at the serving size, and then work your way down into the amount of fat, cholesterol, sodium, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think this is a good food item? Or how could it be made better?
There's a couple of magnifying glasses
Yeah, so
over
this is
there too,
also in
if you
your,
can't
this
see
is
it
also in the
close enough.
presentation as well.
First thing I always see is that high sodium.
Yep.
In these soups, they're
Yep.
just higher than Dickens.
So again, since it's a processed food and it's actually packaged and it's going to be sitting either on a shelf or it's going to be sitting in a refrigerator for a certain number of time, also for taste. We've developed a taste for a really keen sense of salt. We need salt into our foods. And what's kind of interesting as we age, that sensation actually decreases. So that's why we need to add more to it to actually feel that same, experience that same taste we had when we were younger. So that's something that also occurs as we age. But again, since it's a processed food, that's why the sodium is so high. So that's one of the things that, it kind of strikes me as well. Anything else? How about something good on here? What would be a good attribute of this food?
No trans fats.
There you go, no trans fat. But again, if you go into the sheet, into the ingredients list, you have to look for the hydrogenation. So if you don't see any hydrogenation, then they've not added any trans fats. And I don't see that there's any hydrogenation. So they add canola and olive oil here. But there's no hydrogenated oil. So that does not have any trans fat. Anything else? So we see it's a really good source of protein.
Just say protein, right?
Good source of protein, yes. So this is a chicken dish, so you'd expect it to have good source of, or at least a lot of protein.
What do you mean by dish? This is something that comes in the.
It's like I don't know exactly what it is. It's like prepackaged, you just throw in the oven type of thing with like a sauce on top of it. So.
And so this would be good if you remember how many milligrams of sodium you
Mhm.
had already during the day.
Yeah, well, yes.
Okay.
But the reason why I say how you can make it better is you can actually just make it yourself. Because, like I said, it's been packaged, it's been processed, and this goes for all types of sauces, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you make it yourself, you can actually control what's going into it. And that's the problem with some of these processed foods, is because, sure, it's got great amount of protein, really low sugar, very minimal amount of fat, and it's not really calorically dense. But since it's packaged and it's processed, they're dumping a ton of sodium in there. And again, that's bad for, people with high blood pressure and things like that. Sodium is actually absolutely required in the diet because it is a nutrient that we need. So you can't just ignore sodium altogether. But eating excess amounts of it is not very good for us. So yeah, that's basically what I wanted to get out of this, is that making it yourself is more beneficial than just buying prepackaged items. So now I'm going to talk about how you can actually make different choices with your behavioral lifestyle, and also food choices and how that can maybe impact your blood sugar. So are there any questions from the first part about nutrition labeling, anything of those kinds? For Sure.
There's another type of sugar listed, and I can't think what it's called now.
Okay.
And I'm never sure what it's been. Maybe you doesn't ring a bell, but there's some other type of sugar listed.
So there was one that was listed, it's called dextrose. That's just another form of, it's a specific form of sugar.
Yeah.
It's actually,
Lactose, isn't that in
so-
milk?
Yes, correct. Lactose is
Yeah.
actually in milk, so that's another type of sugar.
Don't they say most of the time anything OSE
Yep.
is
That's
a sugar?
That's a sugar, yes. Yep, so, there's a whole bunch of them: galactose, maltose, glucose, sucrose. Those are sugars. So they just require different types of processing, and they're more readily available. And I'll go into what high fructose corn syrup is towards the end as well. So here's another test. Which one of these, so these are two different types of yogurts. Which one of these would you choose and why? Again, like I said, look at your serving size and then start working your way down the list and start comparing how one might be beneficial compared to the other. And keeping in mind, they are relatively similar in terms of their serving size. Calories, different. But there's one big thing that's different.
Oh, yeah, size.
Well, the size, we take a look at the sugars.
Oh, I didn't get that.
So there's
part.
22 grams of sugars in this one, whereas there's only 7 grams of sugars here. But what's really interesting is they're relatively about the same in terms of calories, but you can actually eat more of this and get less calories, but eat less of that and get more calories. So this is more energy dense, or this has less calories, and this has more calories. Again, servings per container, 3.5. So you're going to sit down and eat a thing of yogurt, or you want to eat half a cup of it, or are you going to continue eating the rest of it? So this sugar is going to start adding up. You can eat a ton more sugar, whereas this has one serving size, servings per container of 1. So if you eat this entire thing, you only have 7 grams of sugar, but you still have a good amount of protein, and there's no fat added.
So is that the sugar-free kind?
So this is a
Going
vanilla
black?
yogurt.
Pardon?
This is a vanilla yogurt,
Mhm.
and this is a plain yogurt. So this one has been sweetened with sugar, and this one has no added sugar to it. So the sugars that are coming from here, that's what's naturally in, for instance, what we were talking about before, lactose. That's what's in the milk. So sweetened things have tons more sugar versus unsweetened things.
And you make your home, if you do your home yogurt, make it at home.
Yep, you can make your own.
And then, does that have about the 7 grams of sugar, would you say?
That I do not know. I think there's certain things you do during processing that can affect sugar levels. I mean, you have to look at if the manufacturer has kind of an idea of what is made after, the amount of sugar is made after you process it or do whatever you have to do. There's also websites out there too, put on by the USDA. So, and I'll get into this a little bit. Certain things don't have nutrition facts panels. Like if you go to the grocery store and you go to the meat counter, you don't know how much like an 8-ounce T-bone has in terms of protein, cholesterol, things like that. So they actually have websites where you can kind of approximate how much is in there. But in terms of what you're speaking about, unless you really send it off to a lab and have them measure everything that's in there, but I guarantee you, whatever you're actually physically doing in terms of making a yogurt by yourself, if you're physically not putting sugar in, it's probably going to be a lower calorie sugar or a lower amount of sugar like this one.
Would 2% have less, with 2% milk, would
Yep.
there be less sugar?
So whatever sugar's in that milk is what's going to be in that yogurt. If you're physically not putting extra sugar in, there's not going to be, it's not like they're going to synthesize sugar out of something. You're adding it to the culture.
I just wondered if whole milk, I use whole milk sometimes and sometimes 2%.
Mhm.
So would the 2% have less sugar in
The,
that milk?
no, really, the only difference would be the fat content. So 2% milk, the only difference between 2% milk and whole milk, which people think is like, oh my God, whole milk, that's really, really fatty. Whole milk actually has like maybe at most 3.5% fat. So 2% is not really that much different. Well, now if you sit down and drink an entire gallon, yeah, you're gonna see the difference in that, but 1 or 2 glasses of milk is not gonna be significantly different.
I think Greek yogurt seems to be better contents than
Yeah.
other stuff you see in.
But again, you gotta really take a look at that sugar. What's been added to that? And unfortunately, because we have huge sweet tooth in this country, and that's part of the reason why we have an issue with diabetes, sugar's added to everything. If it's listed as an ingredient, again, you have to look at where it is on that list. If it's really high, there's tons of sugar added to it. Now, there's certain things like this has natural sugars in it, so it's not gonna be listed in your nutrition panel because it's not added. Milk, again, has sugar in it, but they're not gonna list the sugar content in it. That's where it'll come up in the nutrition facts panel, is having sugar because milk naturally has sugar.
Those of us with diabetes, and you may be getting into this, also have to look at the carbohydrate
Mhm.
content, because
Yep.
that breaks down into sugar.
Yep.
So I was just.
Yep, and there's differences between carbohydrate, and I will talk about that too in a
Okay,
little
I'm
bit.
sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm sure you heard of simple sugar versus complex sugars, which I'll get into in a little bit. And then, again, the fiber content will come into play with that as well. So are there any questions about this? So obviously the main thing is limit sugar. And as I said before, sugar is almost added to everything we eat today. Whether if we go out to a restaurant, and that's another problem too, is when you go out to a restaurant, you don't know what's added to your food. They want you to like what you're eating, so they're gonna add as much stuff that they can to it, including sodium, things that make food taste good. And like I said, if sugar is added, it'll be listed in the ingredients. Things like the yogurt that I showed previously, if it doesn't have any added sugar in it, it's not gonna be listed. Doesn't mean it doesn't have sugar. However, sugar is essential to the diet. You need it. In specific forms, it's a little bit better. So as Barbara mentioned earlier, there's things called, the simple sugars versus the complex sugars. So things like, table sugar. It's a really easily processed sugar. So once you drink it, it goes straight into your bloodstream. Or once you consume it, it goes straight into your bloodstream. Whereas if you eat more of a complex sugar, such as a grain or as like a whole food, your body actually has to work at breaking that sugar up. So it takes a little bit longer for that sugar to get into your bloodstream. Does that make sense? So there's a whole digestive process that occurs when you have a whole food versus just added sugar. And that's a problem too with, I don't know if you guys drink any sodas or pops. but there's a ton of sugar added to at least the non-diet forms of pop. So once you consume that without any food, the sugar is just going straight into your bloodstream. It's like you're literally just hooking up an IV and that's it. Your body has to do very little to process that. It's also beneficial too if you really do want to consume that soda, to eat it or to drink it with a meal, because if you have more of a diverse mixture of food going through your digestive system, it's going to take a little bit longer for that sugar to get across your bloodstream. So that'll also change how the sugar enters your body. Any questions? So, again, it's going into my next slide. Eat complex meals. This is going to prevent rapid spikes in blood sugar. That doesn't go out without saying if you have an issue where you have too low blood sugar, that's why you eat things like candy, because it gets straight into your bloodstream right away and it's an immediate source of sugar, just so you don't crash. But in terms of limiting those spikes in blood sugar, you want to make sure you eat complex meals. You don't want to just sit there and snack on, a candy bar and then wait 2 hours, 3 hours till you're going to eat your next meal. Because you definitely will have that huge spike in blood sugar. Like I said, eat complete meals like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And limiting the amount of complex or less complex meals, such as crackers and cookies. So it's easy for people to sit down and eat these items because it's readily available and they taste really good. So I'm not saying limit and do not eat sugar. You have to enjoy what you eat as well. For instance, I have a very big sweet tooth. I eat lots of sugary items, but I try to plan that if I'm going to eat it, I eat it relatively close to a meal, so I have the ability to limit the spike in my blood sugar. Because although I'm not diabetic, I do have diabetes in my family, so it's definitely something I need to look at in terms of as I age. Increased fiber. So this is, again, one of the things that processing removes when you eat processed foods, such as crackers, cakes, things like that. The nice thing about fiber is they don't contribute to calories. So if it's a high fibrous food, like I said, it passes right through. So if you have 10 grams of fiber in a day, that 10 grams is not going into your body, it's passing straight through. Some bacteria in your gut might use it, but again, it's fiber that's going straight through. And because there's an increased fiber content, it's going to decrease your sugar intake, because that's going to contribute to some of the carbohydrate in your food. Science has also shown that it reduces cholesterol. So having a higher fiber diet helps reduce cholesterol. I'm sure you've seen the Honey Nut Cheerios commercial with being heart healthy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's based on the science behind fiber, and that cereal has fiber in it. It also reduces the glycemic load. How many of you are familiar with what the glycemic index or load is? So certain foods have scores that are called glycemic indexes. So what the glycemic index is actually based on is a slice of white bread. So a slice of white bread is a huge influence on spiking blood sugar. Whereas something that has a lower glycemic load would be something like a whole wheat piece of bread or a vegetable, something like that, where it's not going to have a huge spike in sugar. Whereas something like processed food like white bread, just pure sugar basically, again, will have huge spikes in blood sugar. There are some really, really nice charts I've seen online looking at different glycemic loads of certain foods and food items that I can see if I can find a link to that and send it to Barbara if you guys really want to take a look at that. The government also has these things available as well. So this is just based on how you consume a product and how quickly you can get into your body. So again, the slower and the more gradual it gets into your body, you'll have a less of a spike in blood sugar. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about in terms of spikes in blood sugar by chance? Is this clear for you guys? So every time you eat, you always get a spike in blood sugar. But certain food items can actually limit that spike in your actual blood sugar, and then your body can then respond to that sugar in a more gradual manner instead of having this big hammer kind of come through with just a very small, very processed, refined sugar. Does that make sense? So food items like pop, candy, soda, those are gonna make your blood sugars go straight through the roof. Whereas if you have more of a complex meal, like if you're sitting down for dinner with, you got your proteins, your fat, fiber, et cetera, that's mixed into it, it's gonna take more for your body to take that sugar out of your food, and you'll get more of a gradual increase in blood sugar, and your body will be able to handle it and process it more efficiently. Yes.
An example that I think people can relate to as well, as I can, is like if you sit down and have a hot fudge sundae, or I know some people that have had like 2 sodas at one time with all the sugar, you get your sugar high.
Yep,
And then you just go,
yep.
and you feel lethargic and tired and logy, and is that kind of what
Yep.
you're talking
Yep.
about?
And if you can think of, doing this for, every day for, 5, 6, 7 years, just having these massive spikes in, sugar, you're gonna end up taxing your body, and that's one of the reasons why you wanna try limiting, especially as a type 2 diabetic, to limit those really big spikes and the stress that you're putting on your pancreas.
Does water then, drinking a lot of water decrease?
It does have an influence on insulin levels, blood sugar, things like that. But hydration is really, really important for limiting, for actually helping with removing nutrients, because actually you're urinating more frequently, and not nutrients, but sodium, for instance. It helps balance the concentrations in your bloodstream. But water has no influence on insulin secretion or anything like that. Big things, limit processed foods. So processed foods, like I said, has tons of sugar added to it. They have high amount of calories, and like I said before with the sodium, anything that's processed is gonna have sodium in it because they're gonna need to preserve it and increase the shelf life. Make your own meals. If you make your own meals, you know exactly what's going into it. You can control the amount of salt that's going into it, you can control the amount of sugar that's going into it. And I'll get into it a little bit later, but also the importance of exercise. So even cooking helps reduce blood sugar, and I'll go into that a little bit later, but that also helps contribute to the reduction in, or to help control blood sugar. And one of my friends actually told me this, and after I've been thinking about it multiple times, I think it's very true. So if you walk into a grocery store, if you can stay on the outside walls of the grocery store, you're guaranteed to have the best quality of food and limit the amount of processed foods, because all the foods are actually, the produce is usually when you walk right in, and you walk to the meat counter, and then you got, the dairy section, and then so on and so forth. So thinking about that more and more, I think it's definitely true. Staying on the outsides of the grocery store is a very good, in terms of choosing items. Again, you don't want to limit yourself. You don't want to, make it so that you're really miserable eating the foods that you're eating. You just got to limit it and make sure that you're, eating it at the right times and in the right quantities. Snacking. If you're going to do some snacking, choose whole foods. Like I said before, don't start pounding sodas or juices or something that's sweetened like teas and coffee. Coffee, if you drink it black, has really no influence on blood sugar because it doesn't have sugar in it. There's actually, I think, in 1 cup of coffee there might be 5 calories, and that's from grounds potentially getting it. But sweetened coffee with sugar added to it. And also, like I said, watch the serving suggestions. Don't sit down on the couch and eat half a bag of chips and realize 10 minutes later that you just consumed almost 3,000 calories in that bag. So. Exercise. So believe it or not, exercise actually helps lower blood sugar. It's very, very important. It also improves insulin sensitivity in your body. Any type of physical activity is beneficial, whether it be walking for half an hour a day. I know there's an exercise class out here that's fantastic. I think something like that is very, very key in terms of helping monitor blood sugar. Anything that's weight bearing too, such as if you're, for instance, going to the grocery store, if you can handle it, maybe you just kind of, if you're there for 2 or 3 items, walk around the store and actually hold that as you walk through. Gardening, another thing that's beneficial in terms of exercise. And also activities of daily living. Like I said, cooking, cleaning, we all love to do. Shopping, laundry, things like that, just physically getting up and moving. Certain things like that help reduce your blood sugar, so that's also a really important component of health. And then monitoring your blood sugar. Not monitoring your blood sugar very closely leads to a lot of other issues if you do not, such as nerve damage, kidney damage, hypertension, which links to high cholesterol and then cardiovascular disease. So proper maintenance of your blood sugar and making sure you understand where you're at during the day is very key to prevent other things from occurring. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is supplements. So I don't know how many of you actually take supplements or have decided to take supplements, or if your doctor recommends. So there are reasons why you take supplements if you're deficient in some certain vitamin or mineral, or you just need an extra. So again, the quantity of each one of these vitamins and minerals is actually based on research where it will encompass, or so each one of these minerals, so this quantity here will actually meet or exceed at least 99% of the population in this country. So just because it says, it's recommended here that 225 micrograms meets 150%, you may only need 5 micrograms of that, if it's even known. So as you can see, somebody that's taking this supplement is getting thousands of percents more than they need. So in terms of supplements, especially with the water-soluble vitamins like the B vitamins, such as B1, 2, 3, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you usually just urinate those out, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. The problem is when you start getting with some of these metals here, such as iron. Iron is a very toxic metal. It's very hard to excrete. So if you take a look at a supplement that's geared towards a younger male, it won't have any iron in it, because there's no way for men to get rid of iron. Whereas a premenopausal woman, she menstruates every month, so she's able to get rid of iron, which is linked to, which is available in the bloodstream. So taking a supplement that has iron when you're postmenopausal or a male might not necessarily be the safest thing for you to do. And again, I encourage you, if you think you're wanting to take a supplement or if you're wanting to start a supplement, you talk to your physician first and make sure that there is a reason why you should be taking something like this. So again, these things are not going to be listed on a normal nutrition facts panel, but if you go to a supplement or something like that, they're going to list all these out. So, yes.
Are there any side effects that would show up if you're taking too much iron?
Not right away. You'll start seeing other problems related to iron. I can't specifically remember what they are, but there's something called hemochromatosis, and what it does is you actually get liver damage, because that's where most of your iron is stored. So you might have some problems with abdominal pain, things like that. But if you're just eating whole foods and not worrying about supplements, you will not become iron deficient. If you are iron deficient, usually you can go to the doctor and they can measure and see if you need iron, if you need maybe an iron supplement. But you shouldn't be taking, just going out and randomly taking a supplement unless you've talked to your physician and there's a reason why you should be taking this. Again, it's not going to hurt you, but you also just, like I said, want to consult a physician before you start doing something like that, because they have tests where they can run that can determine if you are deficient in any of these items.
That's very low in calcium, isn't it?
So if you also think, so people always say like, oh, there's not a lot of calcium in this. So this is 100 milligrams. It's actually the highest concentration of all of them. So calcium is one of the it's one of the highest requirements of any mineral. If they were to put 100% of the calcium in there, the pill would be this size.
Oh.
So, getting calcium through normal foods such as milk, dairy products is very good. There's also calcium in dark leafy greens. One of the benefits, or one of the ways you can increase or help increase your calcium levels is also making sure your vitamin D levels are up as well. in terms of what I personally do in terms of supplements, the only supplements I actually take are vitamin D and fish oil. Those are the only things I take. Again, if you're deficient in one of these items, your doctor, if you do a whole blood plan or blood work, and he will find something that potentially is deficient, and then you can find a way to then supplement with that into the diet. Correct.
Isn't it recommended to break your supplement, your daily supplement in half and take half of it, like in the forenoon, and then the other half later in the day?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably, beneficial, so you're not having a whole swarm, so you're not getting all 100% of your, vitamins at once. You're splitting it out throughout the day. So yes, I can see where that's valid. But again, you want to consult your physician before you decide you're going to go under a supplement regimen like this. So again, it's not a highly regulated market. Some make claims, atrocious claims about how the drug works. So there's actually a drug that I saw, or a supplement that I saw at Costco that was a cinnamon-based drug, and it actually claimed that it can increase insulin sensitivity. I have not seen anything in literature that's actually supported about that. So you just have to make sure that you're seeing what these supplements are recommending and suggesting and things like that. More than likely, unless, like I said, if you have some sort of issue or deficiency in your genetics or something like that, if you're eating a well-balanced diet, you really don't need to take supplements like this. Again, pending you don't have an issue, and then something like that, your doctor can help you figure out.
How many of our supplements that we take are made in, and then delivered to our country?
I don't know, but there's probably a lot that are made overseas. So yes.
But you would think that would still have to be regulated.
Oh yeah, but it's not as tightly regulated as our food market. So there's a whole issue with the whole supplement industry and claims and things like that. So that's the presentation. Do you guys have any further questions or any comments, et cetera?